Hey, everybody. Once again, welcome back to another You Winning Life podcast. Today's episode is with Ryan Chute. He is the wizard of ads, and having grown up in different sales and business and marketing positions, he found all of the struggles, the pain point, the disingenuousness, the gimmicks, the wheeling and dealing just didn't sit well with him, and found a way to have some personal growth and insight that led him to becoming such an incredible human. You're going to be just as excited as I was to just have this conversation. This is on the flip side. I'm doing the intro after the episode, but I just want to tell you just how wonderful the following conversation was, as we're going to get into the concept of shifting from transactional relationships, uh, challenging the concept of servant leadership, how to become more frictionless in all aspects of your life, as well as challenging the ideas of what the difference is between a value and a belief. And we spent some good time on how true growth can only come from true healing. So, really look forward to hearing your feedback. Please, 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 please reach right directly out to me. You know how to follow me, Jason Wasser, LMFT on Instagram. You can go right to my website, jason at thefamilyroomsfl.com, which is my private practice website. And if you're interested in any therapy in the states that I'm licensed in, or some coaching for some other aspects of life that would not be therapeutic, or partnering in collaboration with a therapist, we do have some spots coming available starting in 2025 to take on some new collaborations. So we'd love to hear from you if you're interested in that. And also, the project I'm working on is that if you are in the medical field, and you are listening to this and you'd like to learn how to become a podcaster yourself, I'm going to be creating a workshop for early first quarter 2025. So if you're interested in that, please go to my link tree on my Instagram profile, and there's a sign up form for more information as that comes together, so you can be on the email list for that. And as always, thank you so much for listening. And here's Ryan.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So as we were discussing, I always want to make this different than any other things that you're putting out there, other interviews that you've done, but I also don't want to make it more difficult for the listeners to have to go down a rabbit hole to like piece some things together. But right now you're wearing a polo shirt that says "The Wizard of Ads"
I
on it,
am.
and that's presently a company that you are the co-owner, co-founder,
I'm a partner there.
partner,
Yes.
partner
Yes.
of that. And you got there because of an interesting journey. So I would love for you just to share a little bit of that trajectory and a little bit about what Wizard of Ads is doing, hoping to accomplish, and achieving. And then we have some really, really awesome other topics to delve into. But let's start there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Back in 2015, I was turned 40 years old, and I thought I've got a lot of this stuff kind of figured out. I hadn't achieved what I wanted to achieve in my entrepreneurial endeavors and career. Still haven't today. Probably won't before I die. But by George, I'm going to keep shooting for those stars. And I was really coming from a transactional world. I grew up in retail, the gulags of retail, as I fought it out, the good fight in furniture retail, then automotive. Um, Learned how to be a really good salesperson. Always lived in performance pay and only ate what I killed kind of mentality. So this very kind of rugged individualism that had my ego just tickled pink with how awesome I told myself I was. And a lot of it was just toxic workplaces and bad bosses and weaponized fear, shame, and guilt and all of the grossest things that you grow accustomed to. And I was mirroring that. I was just straight up like, that's what you're supposed to do. So that's what I did. And as my ambitions put me into management positions, I was really good. I was a really good manager, operationally, task orientation, getting things done, not a problem. Leadership, I was terrible. It was
Mm.
embarrassing as I look back at those things, and it's a vulnerable thing to think about now because in 2015 I went to the Wizard Academy where I met Roy Williams. Um, Roy H. Williams is a New York Times bestseller of the trilogy, Wizard of Ads trilogy, and he opened my eyes to a universe, frankly, something that you talk about, you hear about the big brands and Apple and McDonald's and all these kind of Coca-Cola. It's just like, wow, big stuff. Kind of like that seems like so not realistic, maybe as some sort of peon that works within the cogs, but never as the thing that you could actually do yourself. And he didn't approach it from here's what Apple did and here's what all these other companies did and here's why they're geniuses. He approached it from the laws of nature.
Mm.
It's like here's the physics of communication, like a third gravitating body. Um, here's the truth about a profound truth. Sometimes the opposite of a profound truth is an equally profound truth. And how do we reconcile that baby? Well,
Yeah.
you know, Niels
The
Bohr taught us
counterintuitive question.
the counterintuitive question, and
Yeah.
and these are the things that he had started having a struggle with, and had been doing for many years, as I came to find out. 2 years later, he invited me to become a partner after a lot of conversations, communications, me going to his classes over and over again, like a lost puppy, because I'd realized that I was living in this transactional space, and I'd make just just obnoxious amounts of money. There was no question about the success that came from those transactional kind of uh, tactics and strategies. But it was very abundantly clear to me that it's way more than transactional. There is so much more that lives in the world of the relational world, the thriving world, the abundant world, and frankly, most people don't even realize, like I didn't realize in 2015, that not only is there this abundant world, this world of thriving, keeping up with the Joneses, but there's a whole other world, a universe that sits above it in the self-esteem and the self-actualization that comes from letting go of the rugged individualism of a sturdy white man with intelligence who's able to get things done. And stepping into a universe of the only place we can go to really make this that much more powerful is together. True leader can't lead people who aren't going to follow him. And if you're hoping to be the leader, whether you're of title a leader or not, it's not authority that we're talking about. It's the fact that people will buy in and follow you. Um, that matters for us to go collectively together and build something bigger than ourselves. By definition, it has to be more than just you doing it,
Right.
right? And when I started to realize this, I got excited and I really just did what I do, um, and that's to go deep and wide and figure this whole thing out and figure out how I can step away from the friction, from the transactional mindsets and frankly the wiring and the chemistry, the biology of my brain and body that says I'm in survival mode or thriving mode. Because if I don't address that, then I'm never actually going to do anything but, put band-aids on symptoms and never actually relieve the pain and move towards that bigger, better, stronger, um, accelerated profitable growth, profitable
Mm.
being in whatever the definition of success is for different people, profitable in relationships, as rich, deep, more
Right.
meaningful connections, money, success, connection, all of the things that actually matter, not just, appeasing the
Mm.
shareholders.
It sounds so applicable to my world as a therapist.
Mm,
And I shared with you before that I had a new client call and right the media like, well, and how much do you charge per hour? And I'm like, well, I could share that with you, but it may not matter if I'm $500 an hour or $5 an hour if we're not the right fit for each other. But let me make sure that you're the right fit for my practice first and that I can help you.
mhm,
And so many people are just not used to that question,
right.
right? I think you're going to be able to help me because I'm calling you and you're the first person that called me back or answered the phone because that's an issue with therapists that I feel like they don't have their systems in place, and they're not answering calls, and they're not answering emails, and they're not calling clients back. And I can tell you how big my conversion rate is of being the guy that sneaks in that call in between session, or emailing and saying, I got your email. I will be calling you back, or you can call me between this time and I will answer the phone.
Hmm.
Right. And just letting them know. And my conversion rates on that have gone through the roof compared to
Right.
colleagues of mine are like, I don't know where the clients are. I'm like, well, because you're not calling them back. So, but the idea of this friction, this idea of transaction
Hmm.
is you provide a service, you get paid for it. If you provide it better, quicker, faster, you get paid more. If it has the value, perceived value, I'll pay even more.
Hmm.
I think people, you're right. I think people are done with that. And I've even seen right in some of your videos that you put up about like the truck and, why are people willing to pay $60,000 for a basic truck versus like a $30,000, right? And can it help me get there quicker, faster, more efficiently, and more comfortably, right? It's the value over cost
Hmm.
paradigm, and relationships are finally catching up with that.
Right.
I think
Right.
that people have been paying too much for relationships. In other words, it's cost them too much, which is why they eventually come to therapy,
Yep.
right? When they should have been doing it years ago. But right now they're coming and like, oh, I'm thinking about getting divorced, or I'm realizing now my spouse is abusive, or I'm realizing that I need a better relationship with my parents. Okay. Well,
Right.
you've known this, but why now?
Right.
Why today?
Right.
Why not next month? Why aren't you? Why not wait till after the holidays,
Hmm.
as we're the beginning of December, right? So I feel like what you're saying is so spot on, and people don't realize what I didn't realize for so many years. I ran away from being an entrepreneur. I was just a guy who ran away from a third generation family furniture business. So my family's still in it. My brother and sister are still in it. And they're doing great, and it's a great business, high end American and Italian furniture. But I ran away from that mindset of being an entrepreneur
Mm.
until I realized that I can't be an amazing therapist without being entrepreneurial.
Right. Right. Uh, Entrepreneurship is absolutely a mindset, and not everyone should be an entrepreneur because they're technically sound.
Right.
I frankly, I shouldn't have been a leader or put into a leadership position until I was taught how to be a leader. And sometimes you have to figure it out, and sometimes that's just your path, that's your story, and those are all okay.
Yeah.
But your story brought us, it brought me to our conversation, and somebody listening to this podcast story brought them to this conversation that we're having. And now it's time for you to reflect on your subconscious and self-conscious, and think, am I being all of the person that I can be? And what are some both tactical ways that I can just um, smooth out the rough bits that are causing friction and resistance from
Yeah.
people? And what are the things that are you know, things to celebrate about me that actually grease the wheel, so to speak?
Right. Yeah. And I see this like even this platform of having a podcast. I by default am what people who know me are always shocked when I say this, and I'm super shy, and I'm actually more an introvert than an extrovert. But when I go out and I'm like, in certain situations, I'll talk to everybody, but also like being in certain situations, I'm like, I don't know if I want to talk to somebody, I feel uncomfortable. But this podcast, in a way, has allowed me, right, to get in front of people that I would never have the opportunity of
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah.
But instead of it being like, hey, I'd like to pick your brain for some advice, it's how can it be mutually beneficial
Hmm.
for right someone who has a business, someone who has books, book in the making, or already has a book out or a course or whatever that I feel in alignment with,
Yeah,
that other people can benefit, right? So it's a good for all paradigm, and that gives the other
yeah,
person more investment in wanting to spend time with me.
yeah.
But I'm getting the same information. I'm just right.
Absolutely.
It all, but it feels good for both people. It doesn't feel like I'm taking from an ask
That's
without
it,
anything in
right?
return.
And one of my mentors is Lisa Nichols, and she says when I'm learning, we're all learning, or when you're learning, I'm teaching to one, I'm teaching to all. All of these narratives are true in podcasts. That's one of the real charms of podcasting, is that these shared experiences that we're having right now are almost a voyeuristic look into a conversation between two people who've invested their genius into similar things with slightly different angles of approach, which is what makes this whole darn thing quite
Yeah.
interesting. But also just allows for a perspective. I don't know how many times in the last 6, 7 years, 8 years with Roy, and with people that he's introduced to me and so forth, where somebody has said something just a little bit differently and it connected. And I was like, whoa, holy cow. Like life-changing transformational moments.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal because at the end of the day, we need sometimes just need to rattle our own cages to get the dust off and start pointing in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. I just got back. So it's December 4th as we're recording this. And 2 weeks ago, I was in Dallas, Texas, and visiting my mentor, Rick Sapio, um, capital venture, but created a program called Business Finishing School,
Mhm.
which was a paid, training program, accountability for business owners on how to actually truly be successful entrepreneurs. And it wasn't about the dollar. It was all led through core values and adding value to your community and becoming a better human. And so that was what really made me fall in love with it. But unfortunately, he has pancreatic cancer at 57 years old. And
Yeah.
I flew out in July for 1 or 2 days to see him then. And it's now, unfortunately, as we're listening to this, it's pancreatic cancer. It's how long, not, how long can you fight it type of situation. And it was so humbling to be, a community of probably thousands of people that have been involved in this community, but to be able to just show up while going from treatment to treatment and it just being a holding space after all the impact and shifts I've had in my life
Yeah.
from a mentor that
Mhm.
really did, in addition to just being a therapist and then all the integrative and alternative medicine stuff, that this program was the other big topping on my
Mhm.
personal and professional shifts to just be able to hold someone's hand while they're getting acupuncture needles in them
Mhm.
because they're just skin and bones and everything hurts so badly
Yeah.
from someone who's, where at the end of the day, it's just the relationship and the gratitude for having that impact on our lives, right? Like you're saying, have this with your mentor, and now you've become a partner with your mentor.
Yeah.
And not everybody gets. I don't want to pass up the opportunity to just say how freaking cool you have. That is that you have that
I,
opportunity, and he's seen that, and he saw that value in you, and that awesomeness in you.
well, and through the transactional nature of who I was, he saw
Yeah,
through the intention, which is I think what Roy is astoundingly good at is understanding um, the human condition, um, and and the people that he introduced into my life that furthered that narrative and conversation. I have a rules of engagement, you know, that I truly believe, based off of a lot of study, um, are true to businesses, that are very true to people in general. It's like business and life when I
mm-hmm.
think of friction. Because as I started making the bridge between advertising and sales, which was the first place I was in my head with Roy, as he was going, this is the rules of advertising, and this is how you get people to retain and recall and delight and like you, and this is the chemistry of loyalty. Um, I realized, holy cow, that's true in sales too. Oh, holy cow, that's true in training too. Oh, holy cow, that's true in my relationships with
Mm.
my wife and my kid and all of these things. And when I started getting those initial realizations, I'm like, we're really talking about some very, very fantastical things that really boil down to a very simple set of communication rules, these first principle rules of communication that really do cut away friction in a person's life at all levels if you practice it and allow yourself to be vulnerable enough to step into those. And in that three, try this on my wrist, I wear them every day. Helping people win in a trustworthy and grateful manner.
Mm.
When I did the research around everybody's core values, mission statements, purpose, vision, blah 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 blah, all the nonsense that we've seen for hundreds of years, about the things that gurus have turned this mess into, it boiled down to some pretty core things, and the core things were all of these different ways of saying it boiled down to three buckets. We're either helping people win, they're not mutually exclusive, but helping people win, being worthy of trust, and living gratefully. And I'll tell you that the grateful part um, was the outlier that I did not expect. And uh, a friend of mine, an author, consultant in the gratitude and leadership space, C4, and wrote a book called Surviving to Thriving, The 10 Laws of Grateful Leadership. And he and I had many discussions about it, and he truly had me um, better understand the power of gratitude. And today I deeply believe that gratitude is the ultimate pursuit of happiness, right? It is not money, it is not things. Can you buy something and be happy? Yes, but it's not the thing that made you happy. It's the gratitude that you could buy that thing and the gratitude you have for interacting with that thing. So there's this misnomer of all of these things. Money can't buy happiness. Yeah, actually, scientifically, it's been proven that it can, but not in the way you think, right? It's not a direct line correlation. The stopgap is the thing that made you happy was the ability that you that's a symbol of your ability to have thrived in this world, to have shown the world that you were autonomous, that you mastered something, and that you lived a life of purpose that got you to where you are today. You're feeding the identity. So ultimately, this all lives around identity. The whole core motivation of the entire universe lives around our individual identities and how they fit against and in comparison and proximity to the ones we love and the bigger tribes that we're a part of.
Love it. It sounds like a really good reframe of what mastery is and
Mm,
self mastery, right?
mm, yeah.
And just reflecting on my career of a therapist, and like, the whole thing is like, well, what do you specialize in? And you hit it on the head where you said, is this gonna have, this impact and helping people get more of what they want, right, in a healthy way, is also going back to the challenge of how do they decide that they think that's going to be healthy for them to get that
Mm,
paradigm, right? But even
yeah.
being able to ask that question of like, how did you decide that that's what you want, right? What help me understand
Yeah.
the motivations, right? Like you said about that, and that's usually where a lot of the friction comes in because people are talking about what they think they want, but yet
Mm,
their life does have so much resistance and friction
mm,
about those things that there must be something in there in their organic belief systems, their rules, their assumptions, their
mm.
expectations,
Yeah.
whatever, intergenerational themes that needs to be sifted and sorted through to truly
Right.
get to having clarity and certainty of the direction they need to be heading in order to have a frictionless experience.
Well, and I think it really comes down to you know, there's two times that you ask, you start reflecting on these things. One is when you're in survival mode and you're going, why does it have to be so damn hard all the time? Right? Why is it happening to me? Why is this universe conspiring against me? And then there's the point where you get into a more what Abraham Maslow and his hierarchy of needs would be called belonging, right? That middle section, that's the what I call the third layer or the first level of thriving. And ultimately in that thriving mode, you're like, now that I've got this, where can I go from here? Is that thing that I thought was a pie in the sky, imaginary unicorn opportunity actually a real thing for me? Whatever that means for me. Now, I might not be Elon Musk, but I might work with Elon Musk one day because we're doing big things that matter together. And I've abandoned my ego back in survival mode, right? So it really starts with, as Abraham Maslow would say, 65% of people are either trying to get into the third category of belonging or stay in the third category of belonging, which is what they perceive as, Ma, I made it, right? Keeping up with the Joneses,
Yeah.
the bigger TV, the nicer car, the prettier wife, the cuter kids. And for the love of God, let's just keep this whole house of cards together,
Right. And then
right?
it's reactive mode. And I see that a lot of, and that's again going back to the beauty of the psychology of entrepreneurship,
Mhm.
of how much self-actualization is embedded if done in the healthy way.
Yeah,
And of course, right, our conversation is about how to make it healthy versus, like you said, just the sales guru type of
right.
mentality of everybody needs your product and everyone, no, not everybody needs it,
No,
right,
actually, no.
type of thing, right,
That's
sell or be sold, right, type of
what
mentality.
yeah. David Goggins is somebody that you had brought up
Mm-hmm.
that made me think exactly of that. When you think of David Goggins, he's like it's all like raw,
It's
like
beast
it's
mode
all
all the
beast
time,
mode all
yeah.
the time, like, and that's the persona that he has to put on, which it's got to be exhausting for the
Mhm.
person. But equally as much, one of the things that I learned from the book Tribal Leadership, which was really kind of the roadmap for Zappos and the huge success that they became with Tony Shea, bless his heart, and rest in peace. Uh, it was very much about you have to meet people where they're at. And one of the things that I've come to realize is the first person you need to meet in survival mode is yourself. And yourself isn't telling you the truth. And there's a guy in a committee, and he's the chairman of the board, and that guy's name is the ego, and he's telling you all kinds of stupid shit that's not real. Like it's like all kinds of nonsense. And it sounds believable though, because he's one hell of a salesperson.
Well,
Like
heck yeah.
he's pretty believable because he's you. Right? It's like, man, that sounds like pretty darn reasonable. I am kind of, that guy is trying to steal my wife. That guy stole that sale from me. Like
And
ego.
then you got to
Oh,
Scooby Doo it, and you're like, oh, it's Old Man Winters,
exactly, exactly. So
and I almost got
when
away with it too, you meddling kids, right? So
that's
that's the
this
way you
is
have to look at it. There
this
you
is
go.
exactly it. When Fred unmasks it and it's Fred, then you realize, aha, I've gotten to
Uh,
the root, right?
yeah,
That's the whole thing. I love the Scooby Doo reference. That's just awesome. I might have to borrow that one from you.
go for
Um,
it.
that's the whole thing, though, right? Like when we start to self-reflect and dig past the subconscious and really start stirring around in what it is that's making us think and act that way, and then making a decision of, yeah, that's nonsense, and this is actually healthier, thriving, abundant, profitable, mentally, physically healthy,
Yeah,
happy, right? And we just have these simple constructs that we put together that allow us and give us our own permission to step forward. Then we can serve others as leaders. It doesn't matter if you're a boss or not. It's being a leader in life is such a big deal.
yeah. No, I see this, and as my own journey, right? Like I ran away from this whole owning a business. Like I was a therapist and I'm a healer. I don't own a business, right?
That's right.
That whole
Yes.
right. I completely rejected. I grew up in South Florida. I was a scholarship kid, right? I had kids in my class who were nice kids, but they were getting their Land Rover at 16 years old or their sports
Hmm.
car, right? And meanwhile I'm the scholarship kid, and I had just had this whole false belief about money, but it was again it was that transactional right experience until I started meeting people who were radically successful financially,
Mm.
who also were like, wow, you're also a good person. You're not perfect. You're radically human, right? You still go to couples counseling, or you still have to go to therapy, or you still have a fight with somebody in your family, but it's that self-awareness and I think what really shifted it for me the most, and I do see this in my world too, and I see it in other, any of the helping professions, is how even those who are helping still don't take full accountability for their own outcomes. And I think when I learned that concept through this program, it's not unique to this program, but it was something that was really drilled into us, is that Rick would say an entrepreneur is a person who's entirely accountable for all of their outcomes.
Mm.
Then you're an entrepreneur, right? And that's that mindset. Again, it doesn't mean you have to own a business, but if you're a family and you want to decide how your children are being raised and what food you're feeding them and who they're spending time with and where you're going on vacation and what movies you're seeing, by
Hmm.
deciding the core values around that and then holding accountable to that, that's
Yeah.
being entrepreneurial. And that was his ultimate mindset about, like, it's not about owning a 7 or 8 figure business.
No.
That can help.
And
I mean, that's good. You should do that too if you can, right? But
I,
it's the
I think
accountability of outcomes.
I think there's a trap that is in that the pitfall that is often in the entrepreneurial or leadership mindset is in the blind spot. It's in a spot you don't see it. It's got nice little leaves covering over top of it, and there's spikes in underneath, and you're gonna get hurt. And that trap is two things. One is survival mode thinking. The ego is constantly tugging you back down, saying, "Hey,
Sure.
bro, man, that crazy stuff going on. You got to watch that stuff, right? They're trying to get your thing. You're better than that. You deserve better. And do you, or are you being a
Yeah.
bit
Right.
precious,
It's
right?
cluttering. It's clearing through all that.
It's
Yeah.
clearing through that. The other thing is that if we're not careful, what we believe our values are actually just beliefs. And and there's a crazy trap that waters down what we fix a lot of the time at Wizard of Ads, and not because we're smarter than anyone else, but because we've come to recognize one thing, and that one thing is that beliefs are worthless. Beliefs as a whole are interchangeable, right? When you think about justice and mercy, in justice, it really depends on which side of the table you're sitting on, right? And mercy is the same story. It just depends on which side of the table you're sitting on as to what you want, but they're both profoundly true statements. If I'm the accused murderer, I want mercy. And if I'm the victim's family, I want justice. But what happens when the victim's family murders the murderer? Now what? They want mercy, right? So completely okay and natural. This is the world we live in of duality. We can't not be a part of this in our universe. The difference being that value is about doing what is inconvenient for you for the benefit of somebody else. Inconvenient in whatever way you define that. In business, that could be staying open late, even though there might not be any calls to go out to. In your life's family life, it might be listening and opening up dialogue that is dangerous and or scary for you, because you know there may be repercussion from that because the other person's not necessarily fitting in that same wavelength at the time. They're going to weaponize that later. So there are these things. I grew up in a weaponized fear, shame, and guilt space. Do you think I'm conditioned to be sensitive to weaponized fear, shame, and guilt? I think everything is
Sure.
weaponized,
Yeah.
right? So my wiring is designed for that. And that's super irritating to my wife, right? Because I do get triggered, and I thought that was a silly word for a long time, but I realized that's actually what's happening there. And as a 49-year-old white man in a very privileged position, I'm what I thought were rights are actually really just my entitlements, right? So if you want to deliver value, you have to ask yourself, what am I willing to sacrifice? What am I willing to struggle with for the benefit of somebody else? Because true honor lives with you actually accepting the self-inflicted wound, the self-consequence you put in place, and that value in your family life and in your business, right? It's all the same value. People value you as an individual or a brand when you do something of value, which means that you did a sacrifice or a consequence or a sacrifice or a struggle, right? When you could have done the easy thing and just made it better for you, but that's
Right.
what the customer is looking for.
Yeah.
Roy just yesterday said, Ryan, do you want to know what the real difference in real definition of value is? And I like, from you, Roy, I want to know anything that you have to say. And he goes, value is the perceived value of whatever it is, the perceived worth of whatever it is that you're selling, offering, getting buy-in from, in excess of the pay that you have to send out. Now, the pay could be money, energy, or time, but if that pay is less than the value, the customer sees it as good value. And when they see it the other way around, that they're paying too much money, energy, or time for what you're proposing, that's a bad value. What do you want to be? You want to be such an outrageous value without such an expense to your operation internally or as a brand, that you can't continue on to deliver that consistently, sustainably for the inevitable future. So there's
Yeah.
this balancing act of resources that happens on both sides, but very often an awful lot of value requires fairly minimal resource output, money, energy, or time
Sure.
when packaged correctly and cutting out all the extra nonsense that doesn't matter, like greed and inefficiency and the stuff that
The
it's
fluff.
it's the fluff.
Yeah.
It's taking up
Yeah.
space, right?
Yeah, it's interesting that you're saying, right, as I'm reflecting on what you're saying and bringing it back to how does this show up in the therapy world or even just in like any dynamic of relationships, let's just put it that way. I'm interpreting it as what's one less hill you're willing to die on this week
Mhm.
in order to be able to connect more with somebody else, to
Yeah,
be present in some different way than you've been before, right? What's one belief you have to let go of? What's one belief you have to abandon? What's that may not have been, should have, and again, we can go back to the whole conversation around like, how did that get there in the first place? And did that serve you? Is that even yours? Who did you inherit that from? Questions, right?
yeah,
But even, as we were talking about, politics in our pregame and what I shared with you, like how
right,
that freed me up so much because
right,
there's certain things I'm just like, wow, if I no longer am willing to die on that hill about that, what could that free up for me? And then I did it. And it felt
yeah,
freaking fabulous. Even when I did get some feedback from certain people, like, I can't believe that's what you did or you didn't do. And I'm
yeah.
like, wow, look what it takes for you. Look how you're showing up to me to call me out on that and something
It's
that I decided to do for me. And all of a sudden you're telling me that you're uncomfortable with something I did. Isn't
mm,
that something that you should be exploring? Not something that I should be doing to make you feel better?
right, exactly.
And it
Yeah.
just opened up so much of like this clarity on all these interpersonal dynamics of how we
Mhm.
right we get pigeonholed
Yeah.
into even unconsciously. And I'm not even talking about peer pressure and not even and like forget even like the societal phenomena, but like how a binary thinking in any way.
Yeah.
There's only right and only one way that's right and one way that's wrong
Yeah.
versus the both and
Yeah.
paradigm is so much more profound and freeing.
Yeah. Yeah. So agree with you. Absolutely. It makes me think of selling, of sales. One of the books, that I've read many times. It's Grant Cardone's the Closure Guide, Closure
Yeah.
Survival Guide,
Yep.
and he talks about most objections aren't objections at all. They're just complaints. And I said, hold my beer, Grant, figuratively in my head, and said it's not only complaints, it's complaints, lies, objections, stalls, excuses, and rejection.
Justifications. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
when we have that different narrative in our head of when our spouse is objecting, are they objecting or are they complaining? Or are they complaining because of not their problem, but of the thing that you brought to the table that
Mm-hmm.
was actually yours that you haven't yet owned,
Right.
right? I'm certainly guilty of that with my wife and I think that we all are as humans because we're human. We're showing up as human, and as I like to say, salespeople and leaders and your wife, they're all just like Soylent Green crackers. They're they're made of people. Um,
And it's so funny because I'm staring at my I recently reorganized my bookshelf in the other room by categories, I guess. So I have my up so I can see the closer's survival guide there book. And what I love
yeah.
about that is that it's right, it gives you an example of right of someone's objection. And then it
Mm,
gives you an example of how to handle it, but then it also has a space where you can fill in and rate your own version as applicable to you. So it's
yeah,
not just a teaching guide, but it also is like literally a hands-on workbook of okay, now here's space for you to apply this to your particular field
that's it.
or
Yeah.
challenge. But I used that thing this morning with one of my clients who just a lovely human being, and I'm like, oh, so you need to practice learning how to handle an objection, and like because it's all sales, especially in
Hmm.
couples, right? It's like
Yeah.
I want to do this, but and we literally verbatim what you just shared, and like it probably was a Grant thing or oh gosh, what's his name? He was the ultimate, the Zig Ziglar,
Zig
right?
Ziglar.
Type stuff, right? And the talk about like the good gurus, right? Of right, Zig Ziglar was just so magnificent in that.
Yes.
Um, but it was that, okay, so here's what you are afraid to ask your wife that you want to do this thing on vacation that's recreational for you, then handle the objection. Put out what she might say to you
Mhm.
in return. I know this is something that you might be concerned about, and I want to make sure you and I have a conversation about diminishing all the possibilities that will show up for you,
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
know this will be good for me physically and mentally. And I
Yeah.
don't want it to cause you any discomfort. So, how can we figure that out? And by the way, what do you want to do on vacation that might just be just for you without me around, and I'll take care of the kids that you might even be, right? And make that a good for all.
Mhm.
And it was just like, oh my God, like, like, yeah, it is that simple sometimes, right?
Right.
And
So true.
it's,
That.
but we're not trained. And I think this is the beauty of the curriculum of entrepreneurship is, and I maybe Grant's talked about this and other people have talked about this, where you have to learn these things because it
You
isn't
do.
just again about that like dollar. It is
Yeah.
about whether it's for your health and asking, going to your doctor and saying like, hey, like I want to run these extra labs and tests. Oh, well, I hear this all the time because I do a lot of integrative and functional medicine approaches. And I give my clients the objection to handle. Doctor, before you say, I don't think my insurance is going to cover it, run it anyway, because I'm not worried about paying for it out of pocket if it does come back as not covered. And
Mhm.
99% of the time, the stuff's covered anyway
Right.
when coded right.
Right.
But the average doctor doesn't know because they're just like, well, I have to play within the process of managed care. We don't usually run this. It may get rejected.
Mm.
Your job as an empowered patient is to say, don't worry about that. Just run the lab.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then that it shows up there too.
This conversation, this piece of the conversation, really reminds me of something that Chris Voss says. Chris and I are in the midst of writing a book for the HVAC and plumbing industry about never splitting the difference in negotiations. And he said, Ryan, one of the things that's super important to know is the most dangerous negotiation you've will ever be in is the one you don't know you're in. And fundamentally, everything is negotiation. So
Right.
buckle up, Buttercup. It's a wild ride. Just understand and reframe your perspective to everything's a negotiation. Now, this is coming from Chris Voss, like
Yeah.
total FBI negotiator badass. And I
He's
thought,
awesome.
he is. And look, my early days of Chris Voss experience, I've taken his kind of high-end master class and
Mm-hmm.
been met him in person that first time. I read his book five, six, seven times. And I thought, oh yeah, like badass and guns and danger and violence and death and and what you come to find out about Chris Voss is that he is the most empathetic, kind, compassionate human being that you will ever meet. Negotiation for hostages' lives is about getting everyone out alive,
Yeah.
right? Now, it is a negotiation, it is high stakes, but it is deeply, deeply considerate and careful and kind. And that can be just applied everywhere, in every process, in every part of the business or the life that you're living. Um, if you have that entrepreneurial mindset, what I like to, some people call it the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. Some people call it transactional and relational. Some say survival mode versus thriving mode. All of these fit into the duality of life. And then there's then some. But the duality of bad versus evil, good versus bad, this versus that. Did you know that for every proverb in the whole wide world, there's an equal and opposite proverb,
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So there is no right answer. The right answer is that any right answer is also the wrong answer. So
Context
pick
is important.
context and pick your
Yeah.
poison and put it in context and proximity to what actually matters in the moment and make a decision as a leader would. A leader's going to make a decision. You know this, you can't change your mind. You can change your belief, and decide to do something different, but you can't change your mind, right? So when you start thinking about that, I think about the military. I can't think of his name, fighter pilot, and he created the OODA loop. Ooh, OODA, OODA, OODA loop. And it's this loop that you're putting yourself through, and the acronym teaches you to really just start thinking about what's in front of me, what are the constituent parts of it, and what decision am I making, and then I'm going to readjust. Now, when you're in a fighter plane going Mach 5, you have to figure that out pretty quick, so OODA loops become rapid. Well, how's that any different than life when somebody throws emotion at you and you've now viscerally reacted through the lizard brain that's
Mm-hmm.
saying react, right? You have zero
And it
control over
overpowers your
that.
neocortex. Yep.
It absolutely does. So you
Yeah.
have no choice but to live within the context. And the OODA loop allows us to kind of assess, adapt, and address and move on quickly. Um, because the only thing you can do is make a decision that nudges you there, 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 there. This is not unlike navigating a ship,
Right.
but you
Right. And
can't
it is that
navigate.
nudge, right? And I think that that's exactly what I wanted to focus in on with that shift is that it's this micrometer nudge,
Exactly.
right? That is that life and death. It's not the radical thing because that's the same. That's just the counter balance of what you're already doing to the opposite
That's right.
extreme of that, which isn't useful. It's that
Right.
the micro movements, the micro
The, the micro
shifts.
movements matter just like in driving, right?
Yeah.
And when those radical movements almost always turn into a crash car, and there's very few people that can drift like Vin Diesel. So um, at the end of the day,
Maybe Chuck
like
Norris.
Chuck Norris is fine. Yeah, he'll be all right. I'm not worried about Chuck anymore.
Yeah. So, and I know, just pivoting this into just this idea of coping, right? That we
Mm,
use beliefs or we use experiences that we create stories and, this idea of coping and thriving. And um, some might say, well, coping and thriving is different. And I know you have a different idea around that.
yeah, I think that coping and thriving are not mutually exclusive. I think that the human neuroscience and the biology of human beings, the way that we're wired is to cope, right? We purposefully edit out things. One of the reasons why I know that is because of a little guy on this side of the head named Broca. Broca the bouncer, I like to call him. Now, Broca is the place where it's deciding whether or not the new, interesting, and different get into the imagination or they get tossed into the street. Well, if they get into club imagination, they have the chance to get into the decision-making facilities of the prefrontal cortex, of which there is no capacity for words. That all lives over in the left side of the brain where the boring business is done and all the accountants live. But it's the heart that needs to make the decision on whether or not this is going to be right first. That's why it doesn't matter what we say. It doesn't matter the words we chose to use. It's how we made a person feel. Our solution doesn't matter the way the solution makes them feel now, before, during, and after the sale. And the sale could be proverbial in the sense that it could be you convincing your wife of something or convincing a customer of something because it's the right thing. If they don't feel it was the right thing and they got bamboozled after the fact, then you've diminished, right? That ended up being cognitive dissonance, a bad buy, and at the end of the day, they won't make that mistake again, whatever it
Yeah.
might be. Same with your kids, same with yourself. And a lot of people in this whole construct wonder, like, what in the world does all of this have to do with you writing ads for people to grow their businesses at Wizard of Ads? And the answer is that it's friggin' everything.
Sure.
It's it's
Makes sense to
everything.
me. Yeah.
Because if you don't have a North Star, if you don't have actual value, because you don't have actual values, you just have convenient beliefs. If you don't show up to deliver something that all of your other competitors wouldn't just say, but everyone does, then you're never going to be a market leader. You're just going to be another guy doing the same thing that the other guys are doing. And that's fundamentally different. Even in your business, as we spoke about whether or not you're actually paying attention to people, like one of the things that you believe in is actually getting back to people and communicating in a way that has them understanding that, holy cow, this person actually empathetically is thinking about me. Now,
Right.
we talk about that like we talk about conversions, but a conversion happens when something has happened of value to the customer, and it's micro values that build up to the decision to take the
Right.
leap with you to make the purchase,
And it's
whatever
also
that
the
makes.
benefit to me is not just the dollar amount, it is that I've committed that my practice is only going to be with people
Hmm.
that I love to be spending my time with. And I need to ask certain questions to clear that up within the span of maybe sometimes 20, 30 minutes. It's so funny. Like you see that, I'm sure you've seen this, like call us for a 5 minute or 10 minute or 15 minute, whatever. I've had 30, 45. I've even had like hour intake calls, non-paid, right? Just asking questions and getting curious and being like, because number one, I want to be absolutely certain if I'm going to be spending the next 6 months to a year weekly with this person, maybe even longer, right? Depending on all the dynamics, maybe for the rest of our lives, or me practicing, that I want to be sure that this is a person I want to give 45 minutes to an hour of my energy every week, but I'm also like enthusiastically excited and buy into that which they want as an outcome,
Yeah,
because then
yeah.
I'm going to be the better version of myself too.
That that's it. Entrepreneurial spirit really points upwards, and pointing upwards is why I took Maslow's hierarchy of need, frankly, and I spun it around because survival mode, that subsistence that you have when you cross tabulate that against the tribal leadership mindsets of tribes and how they evolve into higher levels and higher hierarchies, it's small to big,
Right.
right? And it points up, and we're pointing up to grow, not pointing up to shrink. Now, Maslow did it because, of course, there's much less people at the top than there is at the bottom. The majority of the people live in the bottom. Well,
Yeah.
why not just flip that on its head and start thinking from a thriving mindset? And I'm not saying let's meet you in thriving, because look, if you're struggling, if you're having a hard time, if everything's a friggin' grind, if you're not where you wanted to be in life by this time in your life, don't be so darn hard on yourself, but start taking an inward look on the things that are not helping people win in a trustworthy and grateful manner. And you'll start to see that there's some stuff that's in you that's causing friction, not just with other people, but with you,
Yeah.
right? And when you can clear that up, you're going to move up and thrive a little bit more, because you're going to be more emotionally, mentally, and financially accessible. And that's just going to continue to compound to a point where you're going to be able to have that thought again and think, what's more? What's
Mm.
bigger than this? And that's fundamentally what goes through businesses who get to two, $3 million. They hit the ceiling. They can't do anything more. They're
Right.
like, I guess that's it. Or like, I don't know
Yeah.
why. Like I have competitors $50 million in my marketplace. Well, it's because you've grown to the length of your own shadow, and you're not tall enough to ride the next ride.
Right.
And that's going to come from you and your intentions. And very often it's not your fault. It's that you haven't had an opportunity to either cut away all of the nonsense
Right.
that the whole world is screaming at you, and you've listened to 8,000 podcasts that all say something kind of different, right? And read all of these books that all have these great ideas, but really impractical ways of making it happen for a company your size. And you go, it's just like, I'm stuck. Like, yes, you are. Pick a path, right? That's why we're writing the book Frictionless,
Mm.
is because we know that there's these 12 things that if you get that friction out of your way, those friction points are going to be what help accelerate profitable growth
Right.
in whatever you define as profitable, right? But
Yeah.
entrepreneurs want
Man,
that acceleration.
I'm so reflecting on an experience. There's a person out there in business coaching world who I respect the heck out of, and I know personally, and they're just a good human.
Mm,
And they often do these lower cost entry crash courses. And then, right, at the end, they're going to be like, okay, now if you want to go deeper into this, you want the accountability, whatever it may be. And, it's a large, significant chunk of money for their program. And they always they always have their three ways of you can do it. And it's this price point, this price point, and this price point. And
Sure.
I've always found that even the lowest price point still doesn't answer my questions about seeing myself specifically, not the generic person, but with my own set of personality challenges. Maybe, I won't even call it personality challenges, but just say ADHD type tendencies and distractibility. And I have my practice. And that without that level of handholding, even the highest price package, I don't see with clarity.
Right. Yeah.
And it's interesting because on one side, I value so much the information, and just even if just being around the person is nice, right? Even on a Zoom workshop or whatever. Um, but it's one of those things where I constantly see, and I can know so many other people have this in this world of like, I'm getting so much information and value at this level, but I don't see where if I invest on a bigger level, a level that would actually, so to speak, hurt,
Hmm.
right? To commit that I'm going to get that result. And I think what you're describing is that gap that we have to solidly answer. Cause I go through some of my, when I'm going through my billing and I'm like, oh, I've been seeing this person, off and on for the last like couple of years. And the last year I've really been seeing them consistently. But I've been, and before that I saw them a couple of years ago for a bunch of sessions, but now I'm seeing them once every week. I'm like, wow, that's that's a nice little, they've paid my rent for, collectively, right? If it was just last year, that seeing them for the entire time I've seen them has paid, let's say, half my rent, whatever.
Hmm.
That's a lot. That's a lot of money, for some,
Yeah.
and putting it into context. And then I go back and I'm like, okay, so I want to make sure, because you've invested in this process X amount of dollars, what's been the outcome for you? And I'll ask that question sometimes when I'm getting that insecurity as a therapist, which is not, it's my own shtick. But I always want to make sure, like you said, I want to make sure I'm always providing more. I'm like, listen, we've done approximately this many sessions. Here's the exact dollar amount you spent with me. Where? Tell me where. Convince me in a way, right? I want to make sure that we're on the right track. I'm doing enough. I'm doing enough. I'm working hard enough with you, and really stepping into not just taking A for granted,
Hmm.
that this is just a process that might take a long time, but be like every single session. I want to make sure that like that you're feeling, oh no, that really didn't cost me a thing because I got so much. That little nugget was worth 5 times more than what I just paid. And I really do want to play at that level.
There really is only value in knowledge, and an awful lot of us feel good about collecting knowledge. I like to call it shelf help. It's fantastic, just arbitrage of crazy amounts of libraries of crap that never actually get applied, and and we think we've done something, right? It's all busy work because it didn't actually generate a return on investment,
Right.
right? Value is only valuable if it has an outcome that has value, right? So we often as business owners get stuck in this thing of I am busy. I'm listening to all these podcasts and I'm doing all this stuff but you're not moving forward. So this is where we go back to the OODA loop and we look at it and go, how many decisions am I making? How much am I shifting? How much am I moving forward and propelling upwards? And how much am I just sitting there and waiting for it all to happen because that's what the book told me to do?
Right.
Or I've got to finish that book or finish that course. The second thing I thought of is your friend who again pushes out an incredible amount of valuable information and for obnoxiously low prices to get you involved into the thing that theoretically matters. And what they failed to deliver on, right, as a sincere reflection on business models like this, is that they've taken what needs to be a deeply custom tailored solution for Jason
Yeah.
and turned it into an operationally excellent money making machine that did nothing more than make you feel good and take your money. they're not actually providing anything for you. If you think that you can take a $5,000, $10,000 course with a bunch of other people and that you're all just going to get the thing that you need to tick that box at the end of the day, the answer is no. What you got is a visit with the doctor, but you haven't taken the medicine yet, right? The medicine's the actual cure, and that means that
Hmm.
you're going to have to do something. And no little one page or PDF worksheet for today's to do the homework that you're not going to do for next session is going to cut it, because you need to have that struggle, that battle.
Yeah.
This is no different than the Wizard of Ads when we're doing marketing for them. We have highly customized solutions from the same suite of channels that everyone can buy marketing on, right? Everyone has the same channels. The channels actually don't matter at all. Any marketing works with the right strategy. It's the strategy that matters, and the strategy is going to dictate the story, which is going to move this any channel forward, because it's not the channel that makes the difference, it's the message that does. So what we're doing is impacting at the top of funnel, superficial way to get people to call. Way different than what your friend is delivering, which is this notion of I can solve your highly custom tailored, unique to you uh, neurochemistry, and what different unique things that have tugged on your life, be it genetically or environmentally, for the entire your entire life, and solve it with some sort of generic course. Now, am I diminishing group work? No, not at all. That's super valuable, but let's call it what it is. And let's understand that visiting a doctor and having these conversations is not the cure, that the cure is what is the return on
Yeah.
my money, my energy, my time? How am I acting and behaving differently? Which is, as I said earlier on, not much different than running a business and getting your salespeople or technicians to do a certain thing, to your family lifestyle and getting them to buy into your idea, or for you to compromise with their sentiments of the idea, and finding that space where communication is at the highest level so that
Mm.
everyone's getting the abundance, the wealth, the return on investment that they're looking for.
Nice. Nice. So I just want to wrap up with a few, one just idea of everything we're talking about to be successful is really about personal growth and
Mhm.
really about doing the work. And that phrase has been tossed around, and it's now like the cliche, like, "Are you doing the work?"
Mhm.
But it's clear and obvious of what you shared a little bit about your story, that this is happening, right? It's right, the work in progress, as again, as cliche as that sounds. But when I'm sure, when as everybody's listening to this episode, it's not just spewing information, right? It's felt, it's tactile to you. It's not just didactic. It's not just, oh well, I'm taking this from the book and I'm going to teach that. And right, it does come across as lived in and lived through.
Mhm.
and and I'm wondering, as people are listening to this episode, how they can apply that for themselves, of connecting with people through lived it and lived through, and not just like saying like, oh, I get it because I went through that, but what are you offering? How are you connecting through? Oh, I totally understand that. Yes, this is how that showed up in my life. Would you like, would you like to hear how what I did with that, or how this worked for me, or what didn't work for me? And you know, if people are choosing to spend time listening to a podcast episode of the millions of podcasts that are out there now, and the
Mhm.
millions of episodes that are coming out this week, I go back to, maybe this is the final thing we can talk about, is the on one foot question. And I haven't asked this in a long time. If people can walk away with, on one foot, if they put this into practice, their life will be richer, and richer as in more beautiful.
Mhm.
What might that be?
You know, to sum it all up and wrap it up into a little bow, because there's an awful
Yeah,
lot of stuff,
there is.
a lot of journeys we've gone down here, is an actionable step that will actually change behaviors. Let me start by saying we're always working on ourselves because the flywheel of life, be it our business, our relationships, or whatever, is always changing. That ball bearing is now bigger in this one's part of our life, and this one's smaller, and this one's rusty, and this one's, this one's got the brakes on it, and the
Just
brakes are
spray
stuck on it.
WD-40 on everything. You'll be
Right,
fine.
just spread
Yeah.
exactly, right? So yeah, there's always this evolution of the mechanism of life changing, which is meaning that you until it's in perfect synchronicity, which is typically about 3 days after you die, uh, that 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 you're going to be working on this flywheel your whole life. The goal is to keep that flywheel running as quickly and with the least amount of draw on resources as possible for
Frictionless.
you. Frictionless. Bingo. Exactly. Right. So the whole concept here is that I took from a girl, one of my wife's very best friends growing up, and she was talking about her relationship with food, and she was very fit, and she was thinking about how do I kind of think about food differently, and she said the relationship with food, and that just made me start thinking, and of course, as I evolved on, it's really the relationship with communication. And the very first person that we need to have that relationship with is ourselves, right? So while yes, we're working on ourselves and all the you know pedantic things that we could talk about when it comes to the cliches of you know self work and mindset and everything else. It's while we're always constantly externalizing, we got to fix those staff members and those people. I just want my kid to understand. It's like, what if I just kind of understood myself and then talked to my kid? Right. And even if it's just for
Hmm.
that thing, what if I understood where that guy was coming from because he said that or she said that for a reason?
Yeah.
What's their experience up to this level of their life had them lead to say that thing, do that thing, act that way? And how can I, as a business owner, structure that in a way where their actions and behaviors are more effortless? How can I empower them? Well, that comes back to the orange bracelet again. How am I helping people win? You notice it doesn't say customers or clients or employees, it says people. How can I help people win in a trustworthy and grateful manner? Use the litmus test mechanism to just go back and reflect. That is the crux of life. That is the true linchpin of what's going to get us from
Mm.
what we're doing today to what we can do a little bit better tomorrow and a little bit better the next day. Just keep asking yourself that same question.
The law of compounding interest.
Oof. There's an awful lot of power in compounding. And you know what else is compounding is branding,
Yeah.
right? Sales activation, up and down. It's sunk cost. It's like you spend it, it's gone. You got something or you didn't.
Right.
Branding is building, right? It's entrepreneurs are pointing up. Your brand is your identity as a person. Your brand is your identity within your business and what you intend for your business to deliver. So all of these things start to sync up and become the
Mm.
same thing. And that's why leadership to me is not unlike entrepreneurship for you. Anyone with an entrepreneurial mindset is that of a growing mindset, a seeking mindset, a helper mindset, a mindset of thriving abundance and care for the universe that is going to better this place and live with purpose and to have finished our lives knowing that we actually had contributed something of value, even if it's just to one person, and even if that one person, God forbid, is you.
Yeah. Love it. So for anybody listening, you want to track down more of Ryan's information, you can go directly to his website, Ryan Chute, CHUTE.com. Right. Right. You'd also go to his Instagram, Wizard Ryan Chute, CHUTE. Same thing. And obviously all the links and will be in our show notes. Um, Ryan, thank you. There's conversations where that are so awesome to have, and sometimes there's the intensity of the conversation drives the impact of the conversation, and then there's the tenderness of the conversation that drives the conversation. And today, the tenderness really was obvious, and I really appreciate just the I don't even want to call it delicate, because I don't want to be it to be taken as a misconstrued word. Just the tenderness. I love that word, and it's a not used word, not enough used word, and
It isn't.
it's
I've
tender,
tugged at
right?
that
The
myself. Yeah.
tenderness.
You and I have very similar minds in the way that we think about words and the impact that those words have. And the title of my third book, as I'm working on it with some yet to be announced people, are are gentle savage,
Mm,
right? Because I think that there's an opportunity for people to be amazing, badass people that aren't living a gruesome life of carnage along the way, but they're certainly getting things done, right? And I celebrate that, and I want to explore it
mm,
with people who have a ton of insight in that area, but
yeah.
also to just
Sounds very
find.
Jordan Peterson the way he talks about that whole thing, right? It's
Well,
not that, not that
indeed, indeed, yeah.
but it's yeah, that has its pros and cons too, right? It's but yeah,
Everything does,
everything
everything
does. No,
does.
it's and again, just to tie this up, and anyway, if we have to boogie here, but there's so much out there for everybody,
Mhm.
and I want people who are listening to this that, like, this is the blessing of having this, and I get to hear all the different, right? People can say the same thing, just with it, like we said earlier, with a different personality, right? It could be the David Goggins side of, right, or the AA rah rahs,
Mhm.
the Gary Vaynerchuks, and
Yeah.
then you have, right. It's all the spectrum of the information has to come from the right packaging for you to receive it.
Yes.
So I know that what you shared and how you shared is to be very well received with the community. So I want to thank you.
I hope to serve.
Cool. And to be continued.
Indeed.